So difficult to watch. And to talk more about this, I'm bringing in Ruthie Blum, who is a former advisor at the office of Netanyahu, a senior contributor and editor at the Jewish News Syndicate and co-host of Israel Undiplomatic on JNS TV. Such difficult footage there, Ruthie, but so important for individuals to see because it gives us a better understanding and context in terms of what these hostages are enduring. You know, what do you take away from watching that video?
Well, it is certainly horrific. And I would like to add that Goldberg Poland, it wasn't just that he survived 11 months in horrific conditions, but he in particular, on October 7th, his arm was blown off by the terrorists who kidnapped him. And there is footage of him in the back of a pickup truck with his severed arm. So for many months, it was assumed that he couldn't have survived that, sepsis and all kinds of infection. It just didn't seem likely. And then a video emerged of him alive and with his stump. And I mean, I'm sorry to be graphic, but it's necessary to clarify how barbaric these Hamas terrorists are. And then, out of nowhere, those 6 hostages were executed. And when you ask me what I make of it, well, what I make of it is that negotiations for some kind of ceasefire deal were going on. And Yahya Sinwar, the head of Hamas in Gaza, decided to do something particularly sadistic to make his message clear. And his message was, whatever you do, if you don't let us win this war and stay in Gaza and do whatever we want, we will just pick off one by one. We're going to pick off your hostages. That's what I take of it. And he's trying to play Israel. He's also trying to cause rifts in the streets of Israel. He's being quite successful, the protests and all that, because of course it's terrifying that he has control over these innocent people who were snatched from the party and from their homes. There are also babies in there. So, it's an awful situation. And that's why Hamas has to be defeated.
You know, you were speaking of Hamas also, and we've talked about this previously, that Hamas leaders surround themselves with hostages. We just learned, according to Israel, that there was a high probability that 3 hostages that were found dead in November were killed during an Israeli airstrike that also killed a top Hamas commander. You know, what can you share with us about this breaking news?
Well, the first thing I can share is that every single death in Gaza, Jews, Muslims, everybody, Palestinians, are all on Hamas's hands. And if tragically the hostages were killed by what we call friendly fire, it's a terrible expression, then it is awful. And one of the reasons that it's taking us so long to accomplish our mission is that we are being so careful not to kill any hostages during these precision strikes. But of course, nothing is perfect in a battle zone, particularly one that has a whole subterranean battlefield, in addition to the above ground one.
And that really is the strategy, though, of Hamas when it comes to protecting itself with innocent civilians, with the hostages. That makes it incredibly challenging, as you were mentioning, for the Israeli military to really carry out their objectives. What are the next steps then?
Well, the next steps, I believe, they say, I'm not privy to everything that's going on in the military, of course, and nor should I be or should anybody else. But what we are doing is we are methodically trying to knock out all the terrorists and destroy all the tunnels, as many as we can, and seal the tunnels that lead into Egypt. There's a whole network there of tunnels and terrorists. And what we're trying to do, we have basically finished off their military capabilities in the larger sense. It doesn't mean we've killed all the terrorists and that there aren't stray rockets fired. Of course there are. But we've really tackled most of their military machine. And now we really have to make sure to tackle the political machine. And that's a little harder to do because, you know, as I said, Sinwar, we haven't located him yet. And he, as long as he can call these shots and cause schisms in Israeli society, he still has somewhat of an upper hand.
Well, speaking of politics, I want to focus now on Iran. Iran, of course, as we've been speaking about, really is behind a lot of these terrorist organizations, including the Houthi rebels. And, Israel facing conflict on many fronts. What are your thoughts on the latest attack when it came to the Houthi rebels, carrying out this attack in central Israel, and Netanyahu hinting that Israel will respond?
Well, I think we can believe him when he hints that because we saw when the Houthis fired a drone into Tel Aviv and killed a civilian. The next day, the Israel Defense Forces went and basically destroyed the port of Hodeidah in Yemen. And so I think what he was saying is, you saw what we did, so watch out. The trouble is, as you point out, that Iran is behind all of this. Iran is the head of the octopus. I think it's really worth mentioning in this context that today is the 4th anniversary of the signing of the Abraham Accords. And the reason that's so crucial is that that was a historic peace deal between Israel and Arab neighbors that not only wanted to bury the hatchet and, have good trade relations and agriculture, etc. But this was an anti-Iran axis of Gulf countries and Morocco, and what was going to be was on the way to being also some kind of treaty or normalization with Saudi Arabia. And this was another reason that the October 7th massacre took place when it did, because Sinwar, Hamas in general, Iran in particular, was trying to put a stop to these peace agreements, to this axis of peace against the axis of evil.
So where does that stand now? And one has to imagine that Iran, of course, knows the significance of today. When we're taking a look at it in the global context, because the conflict that is happening right now really has global impact, how does what is happening right now then trickle down and impact those allyships, those relationships?
Well, I think that if you step out of the Western mind frame about how you make peace with enemies, what you will see is that the Gulf states, the Abraham Accords countries, what they really want to see is they want to see us achieve total victory over Iran, of course, but in the meantime, over Iran's proxies all around our borders and within them, because they want to make sure that Israel is the strong horse. And by the way, not just Israel, very crucially, the United States. And when they see a weakening America and an Israel whose hands are tied by a weakened America, they get a little squeamish about whether they have actually attached themselves to the right allies on the global stage.
Ruthie, before we let you go, is there anything else that you would like to share with our viewers?
Yes, I would. I would like to say that Netanyahu today, in his statement about the Houthi attack, he also mentioned unity. He said, we're united. Now, that's true to some extent, and it's also untrue to some extent. Israelis are at our wits' end mainly over the hostages. It's, of course, over the missiles and the war. But all of us, no matter what political side we're on, we are all devastated. We all identify with the parents and children of these hostages. and the rest of us who have sons and daughters fighting in Gaza to rescue those hostages. So everybody in Israel is on edge, and that, of course, leads to fights and debates and all that. But I am hoping that he's right, that actually our unity is going to be what leads to our victory.
Ruthie, as always, we appreciate you taking the time to join us here on Live Now from Fox.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, for having me.
And we are continuing to follow the very latest developments out of the